My parents gave their entire inheritance to my sister, the golden child. 7 years later, they show up wanting to see my kids. Here's how I responded. Growing up, my sister was always my favorite child. She was smart, pretty, and talented, while I was the plain average one. My parents would dote on her, praising her every accomplishment, while barely acknowledging mine. It wasn't until I got older that I realized just how unfair it was. Despite the odds, I managed to achieve a lot on my own. I worked hard to get into a top university, graduated with honors, and landed a well-paying job. But my parents were never impressed. They always had some excuse to downplay my achievements, while my sister continued to be praised and given special treatment. Then, when my grandparents passed away, I thought maybe things would change. They left a sizable inheritance, and I was sure my parents would finally see my worth and split it equally between my sister and me. But I was wrong. They gave it all to my sister without a second thought. I was hurt and angry, and I felt like I was being punished for something I didn't even understand. I cut them off after that. I couldn't bear to see them and pretend like everything was okay. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the years of neglect and favoritism that had finally come to a head. I didn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. I met my husband a few years later, and we got married in a small ceremony with only our closest friends and family. I didn't invite my parents or my sister because I knew they wouldn't care much either way, and I only wanted people who were genuinely supportive and loving around me on my special day. A few years later, I became pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. My husband and I were thrilled, and we couldn't wait to start our family. We went through the pregnancy together, but I had a difficult time. I was constantly tired, nauseous, and had trouble sleeping, but my husband was there for me every step of the way. He was my rock, my support system, and I couldn't have gone through it without him. When our twins were born, it was the happiest day of my life. Holding my children for the first time was an indescribable feeling. They were so tiny and fragile, yet so perfect in every way. My husband and I were over the moon, and we were excited to start this new chapter in our lives. As our children grew, we made sure to surround them with love, support, and positivity. We wanted them to know that they were loved and that they could always count on us. My parents and sister were not a part of our lives, but we were okay with that. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. It was a typical Saturday afternoon when I heard a knock on the door. There they were, my parents, standing on my doorstep with a smile on their faces, like they hadn't been gone for 7 years. They said they just wanted to see their grandchildren, my twins. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion, and disbelief. It had been 7 long years since we last spoke, and now they have the audacity to show up unannounced and ask to see my children. I could see the desperation in their eyes as they tried to come up with excuses for why they had been absent from my life for so long. They told me about how they had missed me and how much they wanted to see my family. They talked about how they didn't want to miss out on their only grandchildren. Despite their pleas, I knew that I couldn't let them see my kids. I couldn't allow them to come in and out of our lives whenever it was convenient for them. I couldn't let them have access to my children after they had neglected and hurt me for so many years. So, I asked them straight out why they wanted to see my children after all this time. They hesitated for a moment, but then my father finally spoke up. "Your sister," he said, his voice low. "She told us that she's decided to be child-free forever." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All these years, my parents had chosen to give everything to my sister, and now, suddenly, she didn't want children. It was a slap in their face. I knew that my sister wasn't lying. I knew that my parents were only here because they wanted access to my children now that my sister wasn't going to give them any. They had always favored her over me, and now they were trying to use my kids as a way to make up for their past mistakes. At that moment, I found the strength to stand up to them. I told them that they couldn't see my children, that they had lost that right when they chose to cut me out of their lives. I told them that they couldn't expect a comeback now that my sister had made a decision that didn't suit them. They tried to argue with me, to plead with me, but I didn't waver. I was done with their games, their lies, and their manipulations. I had built a life for myself and my family without them. I wasn't going to let them tear it down. As I shut the door in their faces, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had stood up for myself and my children, and I had shown my parents that they couldn't just come back into my life whenever they felt like it. When my husband came back home, I sat down with him, and we talked about what had just happened before his arrival. He was just as shocked as I was. We went over everything that my parents had said and what I had said in response. We talked about how we didn't want our children to have any relationship with my parents or my sister. We didn't want them to have any negative influence on their lives. My husband reassured me that I had made the right decision by not allowing my parents to see our kids. He said that he supported me completely and that we would continue to stand by each other's decisions. We also talked about how we would handle any future interactions with my parents. We decided that we would continue to keep our distance and focus on our own family. As the days passed, I kept thinking about what had happened. I felt angry, hurt, and betrayed. It was clear to me that my parents had only come to see my children because my sister had told them she was going to be child-free. They hadn't reached out to me in years, yet they had the audacity to show up at my doorstep and demand to see my kids. It was unbelievable. As much as I tried to rationalize their behavior, I couldn't understand how they could be so selfish and cruel. I had always been there for them, even when they ignored me and favored my sister, and now they expected me to forget all of that and let them into my life as if nothing had happened. It was insulting, and it made me even more determined to keep them away from my family. Update 1. My parents didn't stop at showing up uninvited on my doorstep. A few weeks later, my husband received a call from my mother. She was crying and pleading with him to let her see her grandchildren. She went on and on about how much she missed them and how they deserved to know their grandparents. My husband stayed calm and polite but firm. He told her that they couldn't come over and that he and I had made our decision. But my mother kept pushing and trying to emotionally blackmail him. She said things like, "We don't have much time left, or please don't keep us away from them," and "Your wife is being cruel. Don't you care about your parents?" And then they resorted to bribing him. They offered to buy us a new car or pay for our kids' education if we let them see their grandkids. My husband refused their offers and hung up on them. I was so angry when he told me about the conversation. How could they try to bribe us to see our children? It felt like they didn't care about the harm they had caused and were only interested in getting their way. I was shocked and angered when my husband told me about my parents' attempt to emotionally manipulate him into seeing our children. It was clear that they were desperate to see them and were willing to resort to any means necessary. It felt like a betrayal, not just of me, but of my family as a whole. I couldn't understand how they could be so selfish and manipulative. It was as if they didn't even care about the fact that they had completely cut me out of their lives and left me with nothing but only wanted access to my children. It made me feel like I was just a tool to be used and discarded when it was convenient for them. I was especially hurt by their attempt to bribe my husband. It was as if they didn't care about the fact that he was my partner and that we were in this together. They were trying to drive a wedge between us and use our children as leverage. It was disgusting and made me feel sick to my stomach. I was determined not to let them get their way. I knew that letting them see our children would only validate their behavior and make them think that they could get away with anything. I was not going to be manipulated by them anymore. They had made their choice years ago, and they had to live with the consequences of it. My husband and I talked about it extensively, and we both agreed that we had to stand our ground. We would not let my parents, or anyone else, manipulate us or our children. We would stick to our decision. We were a family, and we would protect each other no matter what. NTA. I completely support your decision. Your parents have shown time and time again that they don't value you or your accomplishments, and it's not fair for them to try and suddenly come back into your life just because they want to see your kids. You have every right to protect your family and your peace of mind. YTA. I think you should at least hear them out. They are your family after all, and it's not healthy to hold grudges forever. Maybe they do have a valid reason for what they did. Plus, your kids might benefit from having more people who care about them. NTA. Honestly, your parents and sisters sound like terrible people. It's disgusting that they would try to bribe your husband just to see your kids. You're absolutely right to keep them away from your family. Don't let them guilt trip you into thinking otherwise. Next story. I, 28, female, like many women, have learned due to the pandemic that I don't have to dress up to society's ridiculous beauty standards. Before, I used to dress to the nines and made sure I always wore heavy makeup, James Charles, Nikki Tutorials level of makeup, and make sure my skin was as unblemished and smooth as a baby's skin. And we're not even going to get started on my hair situation. Well, my husband, 30, male, is annoyed by this. He said he liked my old look, and he's embarrassed to go out with me now that I've decided to be a lazy slob. I told him I still dress up when we go on dinner dates, when we have important occasions. I just don't feel like wearing makeup and heels to go to the grocery store or clean the toilet anymore. He said it wasn't that hard to put on some makeup and shave, so I told him if he thought so, then to prove it, go through the same treatment I go through to look good, as he put it. He agreed, because if I've been doing it for years, how hard could it be? He learned how painful waxing is. Soon after, he learned how long it takes a woman with long, thick, waist-length hair to wash, dry, and style it. He learned how uncomfortable wearing certain outfits every day was for me, and since he wanted me to wear makeup, he had to as well. He was in too deep, so he let me do his makeup. I didn't go full drag. I only did some stuff that would enhance his features, yet show him how much effort goes into makeup. Needless to say, after a full day of this, he told me he was sorry, and he didn't realize how much work I put into my appearance. I told him to now imagine the woman who goes around getting lip fillers and Botox, and he laughed and said, "Thank God I wasn't that high maintenance." We both had a laugh about it, and I felt I proved my point. Issue, he was talking to his sisters and told them what I did, which they found hilarious because they too also feel it's about time men understood how much work some women put into their looks. Well, he told his mom what I did, and now she's been calling and texting me about how I abused her son, how it's a woman's duty to look good for her husband, and how I'm going to drive him away by being a lazy slob, and to not be surprised when I end up divorced or cheated on. I ignored her, but my husband's now defending me from his mother, and she's mad that he's defending me. Anyway, did I mess up? I was just trying to prove a point. My mother-in-law hates me. She wanted her son to marry a tall, white, blonde, blue-eyed Instagram model who she could be besties with, and instead, I'm Latina, short, and don't agree with her views. NTA, but beware, OP. You have an unusual human being for a husband, as apparently, if he doesn't understand your point of view, he will actually let you put him in your exact position so that he can see it from your point of view. So, don't use this power too much, or it might weaken, and don't use this powerful Ibila. NTA. You're married to a wonderful man. Yeah, first he had toxic views of women, but he changed relatively quickly, and now he's defending you against the person that gave him this view. I've read enough stories of this idea where women give men the same treatment of waxing, makeup, etc., but the man gets super angry, saying the woman humiliated them and went crying to their moms. But you have men who recognize when he's in the wrong. Next story, X and I, both fertiles, have 2 children together. Our son is 11 and our daughter is 8. X is married to Jenna and is a stepfather to her 4 children between the ages of 5 and 11. X's second marriage has created quite the complicated dynamic between us and for our kids. He finds it impossible to make time for the kids to have their extracurriculars when his stepkids have theirs in different places. So he attempted to force the kids to quit the stuff they like and take other stuff. I stepped in and offered to drive them, but he turned me down. So the kids do not attend their extracurriculars on Dad's time, which upsets them, but I've tried to make it work. And my ex said no. They really hate that he prioritizes his stepkids, keeping theirs, and they dislike the idea that they should do stuff they have no interest in just to do something and make life easier. X has told me they have expressed this to him, and I need to help them see they're being selfish. I told him that was untrue. His argument is they are not close to their step-siblings because of resentment. I told him back then that he should prioritize their interests as much as he does his stepkids, and he ignored me. A couple of months ago, my kids expressed an interest in a particular day summer camp. I spoke to X. He said, no way. They needed to go where his stepkids wanted to go. That he would not make his life more difficult. I ended up offering to pay a 100% of the cost, which won him over, kinda. Then, a week ago, he told me he needed me to take his stepkids after camp for 3 hours from now until camp ends, that I have made his life more difficult, and I should help him out. I said no. X is pissed. Our bios come to me after camp, but his stepkids go to a paid babysitter, and apparently that's not fair or right when they could save that money. I told him I already took the cost of camp for our kids because he wanted to make them do one they didn't want to do because it made his life easier. I told him I was not taking his stepkids on top of that. He told me I'm getting in the way of the kids all bonding as siblings, and I'm making the divide more clear. I think he's being ridiculous, and I disagree wholeheartedly with him saying I'm getting in the way of the kids' relationship. He still thinks I'm an a-hole for not taking them, using, they're just kids, and there are kids, family, and they'll want them over. My kids don't want more time with their step-siblings, that I know without any doubt. But AATF for not letting his stepkids come to my house after camp? Major NTA. You are going out of your way to make sure your kids get to participate in activities, extracurriculars they actually like instead of getting steamrolled in favor of what your ex deems easier for him. If he wants to cry about how the kids aren't his fan and how it's hard balancing multiple kids' extracurriculars, you can remind him that it was his choice to remarry and take on responsibility for more kids. You will continue to do what's best for your kids, and that he should take a hard look at what it means to do right by his kids as well. You are not the unwilling co-parent to your ex's new family. He can go fish. You clearly need to do what is best for your own kids. They have enough time with these step-siblings, it seems. And your ex sounds like he's treating yours, his bio kids, with less respect than the new kids. I expect there's a shared load of toxic and manipulative behavior going on here. He is using emotional blackmail of what the kids want, need, to make you do what he wants. Obvious since this line of argument just so happens to be what he needs to help him out. What an ah. He is clearly, you did well making him an ex. Don't let him bagel his way into controlling your life more than he can through being a co-parent to your shared bio kids. You go to lay down the boundaries hard and firm so he knows not to cross them. NTA. Your ex is focusing on keeping peace within his blended family. He's trying to co-opt you to help him to do this. That isn't, and shouldn't be, your priority. Your focus and attention should be on your kids. That's not to say you shouldn't encourage good relations between the kids, but he's asking you to go too far. It's the equivalent of holding back a more talented student so others don't feel inferior. The children are different. Your ex may want to treat his stepkids and his bio kids all the same, but that's simply his decision. You have the right to support your own children's rights and needs. If that means they have opportunities not available to the other kids or different interests, so be it. In other words, the way you're handling things is great, and you're right to turn down the babysitting. That's not a reasonable expectation from your ex.